Graphic designer, but I am really excited to be introducing all of these wonderful people. And because we have so many great speakers today, it was a little hard to get all of the headshots on the slide. But that is a good problem to have. I'm really grateful to everyone who's been part of pulling this together, especially Antu and Michael Peony from FPWA to your help connecting EPIP to all of the amazing speakers and helping pull together the content for today's presentation. I'm just going to go through briefly the names and titles of our speakers and then give you a sense of what's ahead. So Antu Nguyen is, oh, I messed it up, sorry, Antu. She directs the We See Beauty Foundation. Brendan Martin is from the Working World. Emma Yora is, Brendan is the founder and president of the Working World. Emma Yora is the co-director of the Cooperative Development Program at Center for Family Life, CFL. And Melissa Hoover is the founding executive director of Democracy at Work, as well as the executive director of United States Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Omar Freya is joining us from Green Worker Cooperatives, where he is the founder and coordinator. And Wayne Ho from the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, also known as FPWA. He is joining us today. He is their Chief Strategy and Program Officer. So thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to hear from you. The group is going to go over everything from high level, kind of what is a worker cooperative, how do they work, give you a sense on the highest level of what we're talking about here. There's some representatives from amazing organizations. They're going to speak to the specifics of their work and how they have found the best practices through their work and what you can do as a funder or a supporter to be part of that. We're also going to talk a little bit about the landscape of policy and also specifically how funders can get involved in meaningful ways before we head into that question and answer period. So that's just a sense of what's ahead. Immediately before we jump into the presentation, we'd like to get a sense of who you are on the line. So just 2 quick questions in poll format. If you can first let us know what best describes your employer. I'm just going to leave it open for about 10 more seconds if you guys can let us know what you think. And looks like we're coming predominantly from foundations and nonprofits today. If the person who answered other wants to type into the question box, we're open to hearing more specifically what that means. And curious a little bit about your experience with worker cooperatives. So you can choose as many of these as are relevant for you. If you're going to give you about 30 seconds, if you can please type in your answers or check your answers. All right. So this looks like it's a great chance for a lot of people to be learning more. And it's interesting to see the different ways that you guys have already found to get involved. So definitely hope this is helpful for the speakers and excited to the conversation at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to unmute and pass the mic to Melissa.
Great, thank you. And then can I also show my screen? Great, perfect. Okay, hi everyone. My volume level's okay?
Yeah, you're good. You have a pop-up window, but other than that, you're perfect.
I do, great. Okay, good. So hi everyone. I'm here to talk about sort of an overview framework for worker cooperatives. And this is a presentation that we've given to economic developers, but I also want to emphasize we see cooperatives as a strategy for poverty alleviation and systems change as well. So the Democracy at Work Institute was founded 3 years ago out of the National Membership Organization for Worker Cooperatives to sort of drive strategic growth in worker cooperatives in response to growth and as a driver of growth. So we're focused on strategy, on scale, and on equity. We are a national organization based in Oakland and New York, but with staff around the country. And I'll do a little bit of an overview of what a worker cooperative is, sort of boiling it down to its most basic essence. So worker cooperative is a values-based business. It is a business that operates in the market according to a set of principles and values that are specifically cooperative. That means it's owned and controlled by its members, who are the people who work in it. Members invest in the cooperative, and then they share the profits of its activities, and they run it based on a democratic process. So there's a one member, one vote principle for cooperatives. In reality, what that looks like, it can take 1,000 forms. It's not all collectives and consensus. There is hierarchical management in worker cooperatives. There are various governance structures sort of shaped to fit the needs of the business, the industry, and the size of the enterprise. And so we see some really critical impacts of worker ownership. One of the most sort of universal and obvious benefits of worker ownership is higher quality jobs, workers having more say in their working life. And as we get into who's forming worker cooperatives, we'll see that this is a critical piece of growth. There's also the potential to build wealth through business ownership in addition to income through wages. And then at the sort of community level, we see a real amplifier effect as retained profits keep more dollars circulating within a community. So interest in worker ownership has been growing over the last 10 or 15 years in particular. And where it's coming from is really instructive, I think, about the kinds of supports it needs to reach scale and to engender equity. So we see first-time entrepreneurs wanting to form cooperatives who may not have the capacity and resources to start it themselves, but coming together are able to start a business and run it. People who are locked out of the job market because of criminal records, because of immigration status, people who are unable to access not just high-quality jobs, but jobs of any sort, are forming cooperatives to create jobs for themselves. In that vein, contractors and contingent workers are also forming worker cooperatives to stabilize their working lives and to gain access to markets. So people with jobs or with some form of income that is unstable or erratic can stabilize that through the formation of a cooperative entity. We see that worker cooperatives tend to work well in labor-intensive industries, everything from baking to the care economy, where the labor of the worker really matters in sort of the marketing and the quality of the product or service, and where labor is central to the work. We also see cooperatives forming in values-based businesses, and businesses that have a triple bottom line, a social mission, or just businesses where, again, the investment in labor really makes a difference in the functioning of the business. So this is an example of recycling and green business. I would say the care economy is another example where other values besides profit are coming in to shape the functioning, the running of the business. We've also increasingly seen worker cooperatives as a strategy to grow and retain local business, as single entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs want to phase out and start new companies. They are selling to the employees that they brought on board. And as owners are retiring, as small business owners are retiring, and particularly in communities of color and in rural communities where there may not be as many buyers for the business, we're seeing worker ownership being used as a strategy to save those businesses, save those jobs, and root ownership in the community. So cooperatives get developed any number of ways. They can be started by the people who are going to end up working in them, but they're also often started by a third party called a cooperative developer. And so when we look at cooperative development, regardless of of who's doing it, we see sort of three parts to it. There's the role of building the group's capacity to effectively operate a business together. That's management, governance, communications, democratic participation and communication skills, conflict resolution, all of the things that we need as humans to effectively work together. And then the added dimension of work together, operating a business in the market. So really those business skills. Second piece of cooperative development is straight up business development, what you might recognize as regular small business development. The same principles are at work here. And then finally, we see ecosystem development, which means the sort of outward-facing parts of the business, the supports and access that are going to make a small business successful. This sort of bullseye inside the business, and outside the business. And cooperative developers focus on building the capacity of groups to do all three of those things effectively. And so I think the last thing you may need to know as you move forward in exploring this field is that there's a spectrum of cooperative development. Cooperative developers work everywhere from a low-touch to a high-touch model, and in reality, most of them are somewhere in the middle. So what that means is, at the low-touch end, developers really invest time and act as a coach. And at the high-touch end, cooperative developers can invest actual capital and start and run the business themselves, acting as an entrepreneur. So on the one end, there's a lot of training and coaching centered around the entrepreneurs, a lot like a small business development model with a democratic dimension. And that has a broad impact of stabilizing contingent jobs, of broadly seeding the idea and the capacities for building worker co-ops. At the high-touch end, we see cooperative developers acting as entrepreneurs, starting businesses, recruiting members to them, and then handing them off. Usually that takes a stronger kind of business expertise on the part of the developer and aims for a deeper impact, which is social mobility on the part of the members, so a single enterprise that can create mobility for low-wage workers in particular. So there's the spectrum that sort of frames up some of the stuff you're going to hear from following presenters. And this is a lot to take in one slide, so I'll just park it here. This is an example of a high-touch model. And we have data on most of the cooperative development models, data that looks a lot like this: the investment, sources and uses, the timeline, and the impact that can be expected. And I'm happy to share that. It's one of the roles we play in the field, is sort of informing about what the various models look like. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand off to the next presenter, who I believe is Emma.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, I'll pass it over. No worries. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Emma, it should be prompting you to share your screen.
Oh,
I'll run them for you. It's fine. My bad. Okay, 1 second, everyone. Technical delay. And you're all set. Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, sorry, I can't see them. Are they on the?
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, now.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes. So my name is Emma. I work at the Philanthropy Family Life, which is a cooperative development program. So.
Can you speak up a little bit, Emma? Sorry, we can't totally hear you.
Yes. Sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So kind of going off of what Melissa was saying, talking about the world of co-op development, I'm going to be speaking a bit about our cooperative development program, which especially focuses on women immigrant entrepreneurs. So our co-op development program comes out of the Center for Family Life, which is a settlement house in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, which is a low-income immigrant community. And we provide wraparound services. So it's really co-op development as a piece of as a piece of community development. We have deep roots in Sunset Park. We've been here for 38 years. And we have had our cooperative development program going for 10 years. We currently support 8 existing co-ops and are developing 2 new ones. And there's about a total of 260 worker owners between all these different cooperatives. 3 years ago, we started receiving support to train other community-based organizations in cooperative development. Over the past 3 years, we've had 21 organizations go through that program, with 15 cooperatives either developed or in the process of being developed coming out of that. And at this point, we're in our 10-year anniversary, and we're looking forward at new projects based on the foundation that we've been able to build up. So these include a political education fellowship that we've been piloting to have members engage with the greater cooperative movement and movements for community and economic development, along with two different projects focused on scale. How can we take the examples that we have built so far and make them reach further communities more quickly? So one of these models is that we're building a replication model. Sorry, the word model 3 times. But we're looking at basically how do we try and make this something that's more accessible to other communities. So if we look at what the successes of these programs are, it's really been able to provide a workforce for an alternative for workforce development for people in our community. We came out of a traditional job readiness program, and it's been an alternative for people who were facing higher barriers to employment, who weren't able to access traditional job readiness services to be engaging in cooperative development. We also have seen that workers through the cooperative development process are able to have more dignified work, higher wages, and a voice in controlling their businesses and in controlling their lives. We've seen several examples where people have been able to have greater advocacy both at the community level and in their own individual lives, thanks in part to the cooperative development process. So a quick rundown of some of the cooperatives that we have developed are appearing on the screen. And, again, as Melissa was saying, the part of the kind of universe of interest of co-op development that we have particularly focused on are independent workers in, the care economy and in oftentimes the kind of informal sector. So people who work cleaning houses, on their own. We have been organizing them into cooperatives where they're able to have more labor protection, greater wages, and better working conditions. So the biggest cooperative that we support is Skye Women's Cleaning Cooperative, which currently has 90 worker owners. And the second biggest is Beyond Care, which provides nanny services, and they currently have 45 worker owners. But the other industries that we are supporting include elder care, dog walking, catering, tutoring, office cleaning, and handiwork. And we've also supported the co-ops that we work with to develop their own network of worker cooperatives called Cooperatives United for Sunset Park, where they're able to do referrals between the co-op's clients, and try and engage in larger level community building. In terms of the demographics of who are we really supporting in these cooperatives, we know that 22% of the worker owners, who are largely women, are the sole contributors to their households, and that they run in terms of ages between 23 to 58 years old. On average, they are 37 years old. They have between 1 and 4 children, with an average of 2 children. And in terms of seeing the impact on their lives of before joining the cooperative versus after the co-op, we've seen that wages can often go from $10 an hour to $20 an hour. The leadership opportunities are much greater, and it's much more protected work. This is a photo of some of the worker owners that we support who were recently honored as Best for NYC honorees. And I'll just end with a quote from one of the worker owners from Skye. It says that when I worked alone as a house cleaner, I was often scared about safety or not getting paid my full wage. Then I earned $8 an hour, but now I average about $20 an hour and feel safe and supported by all the women in the co-op. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Emma. I'm gonna pass the mic over to Brendan now. Brendan, I can't hear.
Hello.
Yep, great. All set.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, we can see your screen. And now you're
Great.
in full. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan Martin, and I am as mentioned, the founder of The Working World. The Working World works on financing and training and for worker ownership. So I'm going to focus on these two aspects. Ownership, if I can get my slideshow to work. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to start off just with why worker ownership now, to understand why this is an important thing. All that was described by Melissa and Emma, why we care a lot about this at the moment. As everyone is certainly aware, we have a pretty severe crisis of inequality. Inequality has been growing dramatically. There's statistics abound, like 84 families owning as much as half the world, or 90% of the gains since the financial crisis going to the top 0.1%, that sort of thing. This is pretty well documented. It's also very important to say that it's not just a crisis of inequality, but a crisis of exclusion. It's not just that people it's not just that people are unequal, but that certain people are excluded. The structures of structural racism, structural classism, structural sexism are fundamental to the inequality in our economy. And the last thing, which just popped up there, is the crisis of the silver tsunamis. This is one that might not be as familiar. The silver tsunami refers to the retirement of baby boomers. And there's actually an impending crisis of businesses that will close due to these baby boomer retirements. So all three of these crises actually lead right into worker ownership as a potential opportunity and even solution to them, which is what I'm going to talk through. So the working world, what this presentation is going to focus on is on cooperative financing, moving money into cooperatives, and on cooperative conversions, converting traditional businesses to cooperatives. I'll start off with who the working world is. We've made over 1,000 investments ourselves in 250 worker-owned businesses in the United States and abroad. We actually started in Argentina, working for the last 11 years down there, and have opened up in the United States since and worked with 250 businesses across these countries, in addition also to Nicaragua. And we have a 98% success rate of those investments, which definitely flies in the face of expectation, working with a lot of precarious businesses run by their workers with a very special type of financing. There's a lot of stories that all this experience means I could tell you, but I won't have time to do that today. So cooperative financing, which I'm going to dig into now, we get a lot of the roots of cooperative financing from what existed before. We're not making all this up. We looked at places like Mondragon, Emilia-Romagna. These are places with very vast and extensive cooperative economies. One thing to note about cooperative financing is that it has been seen as an absolute key to extensive development of a cooperative ecosystem and economy. There hasn't ever been an extensive cooperative economy that didn't have a financial support that was owned and controlled by the cooperative economy. It's seen as one of the key pillars in the flourishing of worker ownership and cooperatives. Key to that type of finance is that it has in its mission community benefit. This is not financing that's just seeking to benefit the investors, but the finance itself. What's important is that there's some amount of finance that is available to cooperatives, which is for the benefit of the community. It doesn't have to be all the financing, but that cooperatives have that available, tips the scales in the markets, and allows worker ownership to flourish instead of just investor ownership. The last thing to say about cooperative finance is because it is designed for community benefit and not just so therefore to make successful businesses and not just look to protect its investors, it's often engaged in very active business assistance. This is seen in the places that I mentioned before, like Mondragon and Emilia-Romagna, and it's fundamental to the way the working world does its financing as well. So there's some obvious ways that philanthropy can plug in to the needs of the cooperative finance in the ecosystem of a cooperative economy. Because of the need for business assistance in cooperative financing, grants to support this is obviously an easy way, but also capital to benefit the community, so PRIs and MRIs. With foundations being community benefiting organizations, the finance they can provide can easily lean into that need for community benefiting finance. Okay, so the last part of what I'm going to get into is about cooperative conversions, moving from traditional businesses to cooperatives. Now, why why is this an important thing? This is going from the theoretical of why financing matters to something very particular going on in our economy right now, which is that 1 million small businesses look like they will close in the next decade due to lack of succession plan. There's no one to take them over. These are solvent functional businesses, which everyone knows are very hard to start and create, that will close because there's no one to take them over. Small businesses are also one of the major creators of good jobs in our economy, and they're one of the few pathways to keep these businesses open are the workers who depend on them and their communities that also depend on the capital flows. So saving these 1 million small businesses and therefore confronting the crisis of the silver tsunami can be done through the possibility of worker ownership, which also allows us to confront the crises of inequality and the crisis of exclusion all in one effort. To do this, though, we're going to need billions of dollars of capital. Buying out all those 1 million small businesses will take a tremendous amount of capital. So capital is seen as that the way the capital conversions go together is around that enormous money we have to start moving into community and cooperative benefits. What I'd end the cooperative conversions with is that what this suggests is this could be the economic crisis of our generation. 1 million businesses closing could mean tens of millions of jobs lost, if not more, of businesses that are already built and already solvent. Or if we confront it with the possibility of worker ownership, it could be the opportunity of our future. And just to wrap that up, I would say that there are examples of cooperative conversions already abound. This is New Era Windows, where workers took over a factory in response to a boss doing illegal things and some of them being sent to jail and in what it was otherwise a very thriving industry. And the workers have now become the owners of that, borrowing money from us. Another story that resonates is of that of gentrification, which was covered in New York Magazine not too long ago in the neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York. And in resistance to that incredible gentrification forces, this organic grocery store recently sold to its workers, who were mostly from the community, making a bulwark rather than a pathway for gentrification. And last example of conversion that exists would be this school in Queens, which is a 5-story school started by this family. These are baby boomers, the two on the left, who are now ready to retire. They, over the painstaking course of 30 years, built a business out of their basement into a 5-story building with 68 teachers and millions of dollars flowing through the business every year. And rather than the business being closed, they're now selling to their workers by borrowing money from our fund as well. So this theoretical promise of opportunity is actually a reality if we just lean into it. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brendan. Next, I'm going to set up Omar. Let me know if you have any issues. All right. Great. I can't hear you though, Omar. You're muted. Perhaps I can't hear you.
There we go.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
All right. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Omar Freya, and I'm the founder and coordinator of Green Worker Cooperatives. So we are, just a bit of background, we are based in the Bronx and dedicated to building a green and a democratic economy. That's me on the left on the screen in the yellow shirt with my hands up. When we started Green Worker Cooperatives in 2003, we're the only organization in New York City that are dedicated to launching worker co-ops. At the time, only one worker co-op existed. That was Cooperative Home Care Associates, which I'm sure people are familiar with or have heard of. And it should be clear, or people should understand that the growth in worker cooperatives is extremely new, and that now at this point we're projecting in total approximately 67 worker cooperatives by this end of this year. And we can say that at Green Worker we're responsible for a little less than about a third of that. And most of those have really just come into existence within the past 4 years. And the reason for that, just that brief period of time, is that just a few years ago, we made a dramatic change in our co-op development strategy. Prior to that, we had played the role of entrepreneur. And at that point, we took a path that you can see where we're focused on creating an intensive approach of creating a model co-ops. But then faced with the economy tanking, the closure of our one co-op that we have been working on for years, we shifted gears and we're searching for a way to make the launching of co-ops something that could be within everyone's reach. So that's what has led to us creating what's become a new model for co-op development with academies, co-op academies, where we're taking the role of growing co-op entrepreneurs. So some would call it making 1,000 flowers bloom. 1,000 flowers is hard for most people to picture in the Bronx, so I prefer a co-op on every block. But that's the approach that we're taking. And here's what it looks like. It looks like people coming together with their own ideas to form new worker cooperatives and getting the support to make it happen. And how it plays out, as you can see in this little treasure map that we have here, is teams forming on their own. They come in with their own ideas. And what they get through the process is over the course of 5 months or 60 hours of intensive training and really developing their business model, sales, marketing, finance, co-op, understanding what it is to be a co-op, along the way working with a mentor, getting legal support to develop their legal structure, creating a logo, developing a web design, and along the process, we've incorporated structures where they're really engaged in understanding who their customers are. So they're interviewing 10 potential customers a week and presenting their findings at our weekly gatherings, weekly workshops. What that has led to, and just really mostly within the past 4 years, is approximately 21 worker cooperatives that have come out of the Co-op Academy. And that's across all types of industries, including businesses that I'd say no one on this call would have ever thought to start on their own. Certainly we wouldn't have moved to start them, not because they're not worth it, but they're just industries that are based in the experiences of people who are actually engaged in that work. And there's just so much potential in terms of the potential for work that's out there. So people are really coming up with their own ideas. So one example of that I'll use is Skye Interpreters Cooperative. There were 3 women who joined our Co-op Academy in 2012, and they were looking to start a co-op of interpreters. Along the lines of what Melissa had mentioned earlier in the beginning, these were freelancers, so they had their day job, but they were doing interpreting and translating on the side as a side hustle. Each one had been doing it, and on occasion their work was unstable. They would work every 2 weeks or so, making $20 an hour. Now they've grown from 3 to 10 members just in the past 3.5 years, and they've gone from charging $20 an hour for an occasional job to $80 an hour for what is amounted to at least one job happening every day for the co-op. Their niche, they've developed their niche as social justice-oriented nonprofits. They've pretty much worked with all the social justice nonprofit organizations in New York City that have memberships that need more translation, but their reach actually extends beyond that with contracts with Al Jazeera to the president of Ecuador. So beyond that, we've been able to replicate and seen the Co-op Academy model replicated in 7 other U.S. cities, on pretty much every corner of the country. And here in the Bronx, where we're located, we've worked with one school, Bronx Compass High School, to create a worker co-op of students that are doing silk screening work. So what's been working for us here is incorporating some of the innovations that we've seen in the tech sector with lean startup approaches to entrepreneurship and really streamlining entrepreneurship and making it much more accessible for people, generally raising public awareness of worker co-ops. And that's really a necessity through our business model. We will have to beat the bushes in order to find the people that actually want to start businesses and do them as worker co-ops. And then we've created pretty extensive partnerships that allow us to provide support in the Co-op Academy and also beyond that. And we've seen within the past 4 years that we've really been doing the Academy extensively, a growing network of older co-ops, and older is a relative term here, that are now supporting the newer co-ops. So these are really the 6 principal co-ops supporting co-ops. So a question for how can philanthropy help in this case? I put this in really bold just to stress this. There's the idea that low-income people of color don't have what it takes to start a business and need someone white, wealthy, and well-connected to do it for them. This is really critical to understand because there's an idea of entrepreneurs as being magical, mythical people. And the idea, the concept of starting a business is seen as out of the reach for most people. So those who are on the margin would be even more so. So, getting beyond that point, then it really becomes possible to see co-op academies, creating a structure where people have the opportunity to really develop their own ideas together with other people. That then becomes real and becomes possible. So funding co-op academies and then creating structures for funding or supporting the support beyond the academy itself. And I'll leave that there.
Beautiful, thank you. And Morgan Freeman as well. And now I'm gonna bring Wayne on.
Hi, everyone. This is Wayne Ho. I'm with the FPWA, and as some quick background on the organization, we are a 94-year-old anti-poverty advocacy organization with a membership network of nearly 200 faith-based and community-based organizations. And in 2013, we started enacting a new strategic plan centered around building a city of equal opportunity. And we wanted to not only just have a safety net in New York City that would reduce poverty, but we were interested in looking at new models that would promote economic equity and upward mobility. And that's where through our workforce development portfolio, we started identifying worker co-ops as one key area. And that's how we got involved in the work. And we also recognized there was a great window of opportunity with the new mayoral administration coming in, new city council leadership, both of these bodies which were interested in innovative solutions to reduce poverty and promote economic equity. So that's where we asked ourselves what would be the best role for FPWA in this work. And you've already heard from many partners who've been doing this work for many years and have on-the-ground experience. We at FPWA recognize that there's two things that we could do to support this work, and much of it working in partnership with the Democracy at Work Institute. First was we can be a convener. We can bring together people who are the co-op developers, CBOs, public policy people, researchers, and others in order to improve the cooperative economy. And the other part of it is due to our capacity and expertise in coalition building, capacity building, and policy work, we could provide backbone to that organization, to this work. So creating the coalition, trying to have a shared vision and define the outcomes and how to navigate through New York City. So from that, we recognize that there has to be systems change. And in New York City, there's two ways to do major change. One is through funding, and the other one is through legislation. We made that strategic decision, given that the city council was interested in doing something around co-ops, that let's start with funding. It's not the answer to everything, but we made a strategic decision that if we were able to get some funding from the council, and we knew that this funding would have to be fed through the Department of Small Business Services, then it would start triggering other city agencies to address worker cooperatives. So after a lot of advocacy in early 2014, we were strategic and successful in getting a $1.2 million investment for 11 partners to do incubation, technical assistance, and outreach around worker cooperatives. And since then, we've heard that the Worker Cooperative Initiative is one of the favored initiatives among the new city council. The Progressive Caucus of the council, which has a lot of power and influence, has put it on for the last 3 fiscal years as one of their key priorities. Last year, we were fortunate to, or the current fiscal year we're in, FY16, we were able to grow it to $2.1 million and adding 3 more partners. To give you a sense of our work, in year 1, we started 22 worker cooperatives and gave technical assistance to 26 worker co-ops. This year so far, we've helped start 27 worker cooperatives. This includes over 1,000 entrepreneurs reached, as well as 141 worker owners. So to go back to the points that my other speakers have made, it's an opportunity for us to build wealth and support the local economy as well as local communities. This year, we are currently advocating for an investment to $3.8 million with even more partners, and we should hear from the City Council in the next couple weeks. With this funding, the agency that's administering our funding is Small Business Services. And we've been able to have a good relationship with them in terms of getting them to have staff that are actually focused on working co-ops and supporting our work. We also have started intersecting with other city agencies, from the Housing Authority, the Consumer Affairs, Immigrant Affairs, Contract Services, Economic Development, around how they can support our work. As in working with the government, there's a lot of navigation that we need to do. There's a lot of reporting that they want. And while they have a lot of interest, I think the real question for us as a coalition is, what is the most strategic way for us to work with government? What is the best way that we can make sure there's connectivity to the communities on the ground, to the worker owners, and to the experts in this work, which is all the coalition members. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think overall it's been positive that there's interest from the City of New York, and we want to figure out how we can minimize the bureaucracy and grow the ecosystem. So that's where we've been thinking about. One key area is, how do we support the worker co-ops? We want to be able to generate more business for these co-ops to make sure that they are successful businesses. And that's why one key area is looking at how do we generate business from the City of New York itself. So we were fortunate in 2015 through our advocacy effort and working with our City Council champions to get Intro 423 passed, which is a reporting bill to track city contracts as well as technical assistance services from the City of New York that go towards worker co-ops. In government, you got to be able to measure something in order to make change, and we felt that this gives us an opportunity to have baseline on what information or what type of support is the city doing for worker co-ops so that we can grow from there. There's other policy work that we're starting to do now. We believe most of the co-ops, given the populations that make up the worker owners, could qualify for minority and women business enterprise status, but there's a lot of barriers to getting certified because of state law and city law. So that's where, instead of going through the MWB status, we're looking at creating a separate status for worker co-ops, and how do we start having preferential procurement. We're also looking at how to streamline the procurement and contracting process, using more micro purchases. So the City of New York, each agency without through an RFP process is allowed to do micro purchases up to $20,000. And then, as Brendan discussed, in terms of conversions, we're looking at some policy changes to make sure that there are less taxes, but also more incentives and more assets and supports in order to support conversions. So just give you a sense of where we're at. Like, while we're happy with the investment the council's made and the work we're doing with the government, the City of New York, there are challenges with public funding. Every year we need to advocate for this money from the City Council. This funding also is not for coalition building, administration, research, policy advocacy, or other things we can do to support the cooperative economy. This funding is specifically for direct services, meaning technical assistance and incubation and support services for worker owners. There's not a lot of overhead that we can charge towards this, so it hasn't necessarily helped to build the capacity of the coalition partners. And with this funding, it takes nearly 12 months, if we're lucky, to get the funding anyways from the City of New York. So that whole contracting process has been a challenge. To set things up for on to who's going next, how funders can help. It's important for us to make sure, or we would be happy if there were more connections being made between the worker cooperative world and funders that are interested in economic development, workforce issues, community development. We should be at the table. Capacity building becomes important. More technical assistance and trainings for worker cooperatives as well as the worker owners. We need to make sure there's an investment in the ecosystem. So making sure there's a backbone, opportunities to do policy work, research work, not just service delivery. And then last but not least, this is around business development and economic development, which means that a long-term investment by public and private funding is necessary so that we can really test out these models, but also really see demonstrable economic impact through worker cooperatives themselves.
Great.
So thank you for that, and we'll toss it over to Antu.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Everyone who's on the call, I know we're coming to the end. Antu's going to close out the presentations. If you can start to type your questions into the question box, that'll allow us to make the most of question time at the end. And if you have to go, again, this is being recorded, so we will capture as much as we can the answers to your questions after the hour. Antu, we can see your screen. If you can go into full mode, and I can't hear you. I will unmute.
There we go.
There we go. Great. And if you can just go, yep.
Oh. Great. Can you see this?
Yes, you're great. Go ahead.
Great. So my name is Antu Nguyen. I direct We Beauty Foundation. We are a small operating foundation that out of New York City. We're funded by a cosmetics manufacturer that's based out of Queens, and which was founded by an immigrant entrepreneur in 1975 and has since grown to become one of the largest cosmetics manufacturers in the United States and in the world that's privately held. And entrepreneurship and specifically manufacturing in the United States is something that's very close to us. We've been funding projects for the past 3 to 4 years now. And from our experience, what we found is that, actually, I'm missing a slide right now. All right, here, sorry. Our learnings and takeaways. So first, lessons learned as a funder working with worker cooperatives is that there is no such thing as a silver bullet. And what we mean to say by that is that going in and working with worker co-ops, there's not a one-size-fits-all business-in-a-box solution. And also that cooperatives are also a tool in a broader toolkit in terms of solutions for broader questions of social and economic inequality. Second, that worker cooperative development and funding is an extended process, which means that patient capital and a tailored context-specific approach are essential. So if you're looking at businesses from a venture-backed model, it's usually 3 to 5 years in order to break even or to get to profitability. And so that means that you just have to take a patient approach when it comes to worker cooperative development. There is no, the metric can't be done within 1 year, 2 years, or even 5 years. Also, ultimately, you're helping develop sustainable businesses, and as a result, to treat them like one. So that means that when working with worker cooperative businesses, you know, we've seen that what works best is, you know, the best business is one that can be that is working within the market that can handle it. If you're creating a business that is just unsustainable within the broader market, you know, you don't have customers available. It's not offering a product that individuals, that consumers need, and that's not offering the services that people want. It's ultimately not going to succeed. Opportunities and challenges that we've seen is in developing and supporting cultures of entrepreneurship. What we've seen with a lot of worker cooperative members is that a lot of them, they might not necessarily have been entrepreneurs themselves, although all entrepreneurship can be learned and taught, and a lot of people just have it innately. But you know, if an individual has been working in a factory for the past 20 years, it might be difficult to get out of hierarchical modes of thinking. So in terms of like creating leadership and skills and just sort of developing the idea that, like, you know, being self-starting and being an entrepreneur, we found that to be something that's really important for the success of a business. Another opportunity and also a challenge is facilitating sustainable business development in low-resource communities. So that means access to investment capital, customized technical assistance, business expertise, and mentorship. And in addition, a mission and market-oriented approach to cooperative development. So what that means is, you know, these ultimately are values-based businesses. They're about supporting the worker owners themselves. But again, they also have to fulfill a need that the market is currently not addressing, whether it's whatever community that these businesses are operating in, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a windows manufacturing company, whatever it may be, it has to fulfill a need. And then in addition, each of these businesses are different. They're operating in different communities, they're operating in different contexts, and so the technical assistance aspect has to be very specific to their point of view and their needs. And then a third opportunity and challenge is engaging stakeholders and allies to nurture cooperative businesses. So that means engaging anchor institutions, whether it's universities, whether it's hospitals, whether it's your own nonprofit organization that might be a large consumer of goods. And then ecosystem development. Who are the allies, who are the stakeholders, who are the aligned individuals and organizations within this space within various sectors, private, public, and third sector, who can support the work that you're trying to do. Community engagement with cooperative businesses and connecting to aligned networks. So it could be something like other sustainable businesses with social enterprise space or other values-driven businesses. I find these to be important to further engaging with cooperative businesses. So what we're seeing is in engaging and supporting cooperative development, it's more than just grant money. So what nonprofits and what foundation folks can do now is start by leveraging procurement and purchasing power. Every organization has someone who, for example, needs someone to buy office supplies or contracts out perhaps to get the office cleaned. Working with businesses that are already there, that are cooperatively owned, is a way to start engaging the worker cooperative sector. Another way to support worker cooperative businesses is through low or no interest loans, both to worker co-ops and to support institutions. As Wayne said earlier, there's real difficulties with regards to public funding and the cash crunch that a lot of these support organizations have, and access to various loan funds that foundations may have are a great way to sort of provide, to bridge that gap in between like getting the funding and then receiving it. Technical assistance, organizational advising, and leadership development. So a lot of foundations and nonprofits, again, have human capital, social capital that they can leverage and provide sort of the kind of sort of soft assistance and skills to support worker cooperative businesses. Then in addition to that, access to networks and leveraging social capital. So, if there are other organizations or other allies that are interested in working with values-driven businesses, that's another way to engage worker co-ops and bring them more business and provide them with more support. And then finally, education on worker cooperative businesses within communities, movements, industries, and entrepreneurial networks. I think we're seeing today that there's a lot of people who are still very new to the worker co-op space, who are just learning what worker co-ops are, and especially within the context of social enterprise. Just sort of starting to have those conversations of what worker-owned businesses are and how they connect to these broader sort of like values-driven businesses and mission-based enterprises, I think is really, really important to have. Finally, what's next? Philanthropic engagement with worker cooperatives. So this is kind of going off of what Wayne said with FPWA, is to think about how individuals within the philanthropy sector can start engaging with worker co-ops. First to inquire, to ask questions about what the continuing needs and gaps are within the worker co-op space, and ask what the failures and room for improvement are for both for funders and measuring impact and with worker co-op developers with regards to meeting objectives. So, again, like we don't want this to be kind of like the silver bullet, like a kind of Pollyanna solution to all the problems. There really needs to be sort of like deep dive with regards to questions and with regards to solutions that both funders and worker co-op developers and worker owners can partner together to improve upon. Second is to connect, to engage and facilitate dialogue between worker co-ops and potential allies and stakeholders in public, private, and philanthropic sectors. So, as we're seeing, public sector money is great, but private and philanthropic sectors are where we can definitely continue to build capacity and to build allies. To educate yourself, communities, and economic development initiatives on worker co-ops and how they can be a good fit for mission. Does worker co-ops, does that work for your organization's mission? It's an important question to ask, and finding and connecting to find ways to make it work with your organization if you think that that's the case. Aligning, making sure impact and mission and investment are in sync. If worker co-op support is a strategy for organizational mission and goals, and then consider challenges and opportunities to more deeply engage with worker co-ops, whether it's as a technical advisor, whether it's volunteering, serving in some capacity to learn more and to help support, defining the impact you seek, and investing strategically for the long term. And then finally, investing, not just with directly with worker co-ops and not just with grant money. Consider being a mentor, consider leadership development initiatives, ways to create awareness through education, ways to fund and to build networks and ecosystems, other kinds of capacity building backbone, and then to support growth-oriented initiatives to nurture and scale this emerging field.
Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. The questions have started to come in, and what we're going to do now is to start kind of in the order of the presentations that we did. If the speakers can speak to either of the questions that have come in, and or feel free to just share kind of final thoughts, that would be great. So Melissa, do you have any thoughts on either of the questions or some final words for the group?
Well, so I actually wrote my responses to the questions in the answer box. I hope you all can see that. There are, I think Wayne spoke really eloquently to the ways that city government can be engaged, and then how foundations can amplify that support. And then to the question of rural worker cooperatives, there are quite a few rural worker cooperatives, and we're really excited about worker cooperatives as a way to save rural jobs as rural small businesses face closure. So I'll leave it there. I could offer a whole ton more thoughts on both policy and rural stuff, so I invite you to contact me directly if you want to dig into that a little bit. But I mostly just want to thank you all for being here and learning with us in what's a relatively new but really exciting field, and one that's on the rise and can only, I think, really benefit from early stage engagement from philanthropy.
Great, thank you. Yes, we're going to share contact information of some sort about all of the speakers, so you'll be able to get that along with the archive of the slides and the recording. Emma, do you have any final thoughts or thoughts on the questions about government and rural worker co-ops?
No, I mean, I think Wayne and, I think what Melissa just said, really spoke to the experience that we've been having in New York in terms of working with the government, and I know we're kind of out of time, so there's, there's kind of a whole world of rural co-op development that could be spoken of, but I know in particular there's some compelling home care co-ops in the Midwest, and the Cooperative Development Institute has done a lot with rural co-op development in New England also. So again, don't want to, a lot more could be said about that yet, but if people are more interested, they could follow up.
Great, thank you. Brendan, any final thoughts?
Sure, and thank you all very much for sticking with us. I think we went over time, but hopefully it was interesting and riveting to keep everyone here this long. So just to answer all that in reverse, I guess. I mean, Melissa already answered. Also, just to add, rural co-ops. I mean, they definitely exist in quite a number. If you think about it, I mean, cooperatives, worker cooperatives, and other cooperatives. It's all about people pulling together to make infrastructure they can't make alone, and that's even often more the case in rural areas where there's less infrastructure that already exists, and often people are face a lot of poverty. So worker cooperatives and other types of cooperatives are a very common and apt solution for rural problems. In the policy sector, I'll just mention the policy arena. It obviously matters a lot for capital and conversions. There's an incredible amount of the structure of our capital markets that's really caused very directly and intentionally by policy, whether it's through loan guarantees, through treasury policy, through SEC and FDIC requirements, et cetera, through restrictions on credit unions, and on and on. So there's an incredible amount that the government at times has done and definitely can do that can greatly tip the scales of capital to be towards that, what I mentioned, the more community benefiting capital and the type that's needed to develop this type of cooperative economy. And obviously, as mentioned before, there's a lot of policy. Wayne mentioned it. There's policy that matters a lot for conversion as well. So please be in touch anytime if you want to talk through a lot deeper on those policies around capital in particular, and also conversions.
Thank you. Omar?
Thank you. So the question about the involvement with government in New York City has actually, I'd say, stepped in a pretty dramatic way, at a level that isn't reflected in, say, where philanthropy is at, which is partly a factor of the movement itself, the worker cooperative movement. While worker cooperatives have been around for a very long time, the really intensive push is relatively new, just within a matter of a little over a decade. So what we've been seeing is really we have an opportunity now to really push dramatically the role of what economic life can actually look like. And I'd say there's an opportunity here for the philanthropic sector to really take a hard look at what is not just what is possible, but what is the work that's actually happening that's really defining what economic life looks like. For too long, the world of community development, or the world of social justice, has really taken the view that our economic life and the actions that people can take to transform their economic life are separate from the actual business economy. And so the kinds of asks, the requests, the demands are relegated to petitioning government to take a view of creating concessions and having government take the role of negotiating concessions with employers, with businesses. Now what the worker cooperative movement is really pushing is that we can actually take the reins of the economy. And we have people pushing agendas now beyond just those of us here, but we have organizations and groups that are really saying that we have an opportunity to transform what our local economy looks like, which means that community development is no longer just being on the receiving end, that economic justice is no longer just about getting fairer wages, and community organizing is no longer just about rallying people, organizing people to demand that an employer pay better wages, or that a government lean hard on a business. But this is really an opportunity for a new way, a different way of business to exist and to come into existence, and supporting people who are actually engaged in doing that work. So I think this is a great opportunity that all of us have to create that kind of economy that we want.
Great, thank you. Wayne, last word?
Sure. Just really briefly, I think that everybody's heard the pros and cons and innovativeness of this work. And while the government policies and government funding has been helpful, it's only an investment and should be looked at as seed funding. And the philanthropic community has always been interested in innovation, in supporting not just nonprofits, but innovative work in the community. And I think that's where, given what everybody's heard today, I hope one of the key takeaways is what role can philanthropy play in taking advantage of the opportunity now and making it happen now in terms of supporting the work that the cooperative economy is doing.
Thank you. And on to last word.
Yeah, I think reflecting back on what everyone's saying with regards to the role that philanthropy can play in filling these gaps that currently aren't being filled through public funding or through other entrepreneurial endeavors. is something that we can definitely strive towards. And that, again, it's not just grant funding that's relied upon within the space. It's much more than that. Just to think beyond simply grant funding directly to worker co-ops, but thinking more broadly in terms of ecosystem development, in terms of support structures, and how to create a sustainable endeavor for the sector.
Beautiful. I hope this is the beginning of many robust conversations and funding efforts and support on both sides of making better understanding of how we can all personally, professionally, and as part of institutions invest in worker cooperatives. So thank you all, attendees and presenters alike. This has been a really amazing presentation of expertise, and we look forward to seeing and connecting with you all at future EPIP events. Again, biz@epip.org if you have any questions, and thank you very much. Have a great day.